everyone, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you're a returning viewer. I'm Maisie, and this is Maisie with a Z, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in July. So July is a pretty good reading month for me. I read 6 5-star books, and my average rating was 4.27 stars, so overall very highly rated reads this month. I will get more into my statistics and such at the end of the video. But for now, let's go ahead and get into the books I read. So first off was Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This is Hazelwood's third novel, I think. She also released a collection of novellas. Basically, it follows Elsie, who is a theoretical physicist, and she's working as an adjunct professor at several different universities, just trying to make ends meet. And to help supplement that, she works on this fake dating app where basically people can hire someone to pose as a date for them for an evening or a day or whatever. So that's her side business. And this book follows how she's had this running arrangement with one of her clients, Greg, where usually the service only allows you to have one-time dates, but she's been having this running arrangement because he's nice and needs someone to play his constant girlfriend. Or not constant, but repeated girlfriend to get his family to play off him. And basically, he has this older brother who has never liked Elsie, and she doesn't really know why. But then she has the opportunity to interview to work at MIT as a full professor. She's extremely excited by this, but when she gets the interview, she finds out that Greg's older brother he had done this thing years ago where he published a fake article that made no sense, but it managed to get into the leading theoretical physicist journal, and basically had almost completely discredited her field in the eyes of most other academics. So because of that, she has a grudge against him. But not only does it turn out that Greg's older brother is this person who she has resented for years, but he is also the person who's one of the people in charge of selecting the person for this position. It's so fun. It's dislike to lovers, not really academic rivals to lovers, but you do kind of get that vibe. It might be my favorite of Ali Hazelwood's novels so far. I definitely like it better than Love on the Brain. I'm not sure about the Love Hypothesis just because I haven't reread that in a while, but I absolutely adored this book. It was a definite 5 stars. I mean, I'd really recommend it. It's just a really fun rom-com. Elsie also has diabetes, so it has that disability rep. But yeah, it's super fun. I absolutely devoured it. I don't have anything but good things to say about this. If you're looking for a good romance, then this will do the job for you. And then my next 2 books were Orange, the Complete Collection, volumes 1 and 2, where these collect the manga Orange, which is basically this science fiction / contemporary manga where basically there's this group of friends. Our main girl, Neho, I don't know, basically gets this letter from herself in the future on the day that this boy named Kakeru joined their class. And it's basically telling her that she needs to act in a certain way in order to save Kakeru. And she doesn't really know anything more than that. So it's kind of following her as she goes through that and tries to save this boy. And she doesn't really know what happens, but she's trying her best to follow the instructions from her future self. And there's also occasionally flash forwards to the universe with the future self, so we gradually find out what actually happened to Kakeru. It's definitely heartbreaking at times. It deals with a lot of very heavy topics, so I definitely check the trigger warnings before reading it. It's got adorable romance, but it also has really good friendship scenes, and it's about connection and people being there for you and grief, and it's just a beautiful story, and I really love it. It has 2 more volumes that I'm hoping to read at some point soon. I need to get them from the library. Yeah, it's really sweet, and I really loved it. I gave the first volume 5 stars, and I gave the second volume 4 stars, because the actual Orange part of it was about the first 2/3 of this, and that was 5-star story. But then there was this bonus story called, what was it called? Called Hariro Astronaut. And it was just bad. It was not good. I didn't like it. I only read it because it took up, the bad 25% of the book. But because that story was, I would give maybe 3 stars max, then it kind of dragged the entire volume down to 4 stars. So yeah, that's Orange. I'm hoping to finish the series at some point soon. And yeah, next up is The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. This is the first book in a companion duology to The Folk of the Air, which was the series that had The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing. And this basically follows Surin, who we met in The Folk of the Air, who I'm not going to get into too much detail about because it can be a little spoilery for the 3rd book. She was a changeling and then was retrieved by her actual fairy parents and abused by them, and then she escaped and has been living on the edges of the human world for the past 8 years. She's now an older teenager. Yeah, she's been living away from fairy. She doesn't really want anything to do with it and just trying to survive. And then Oak, who's a prince of Elfheim, which is the main fairy kingdom place, and who she had known in childhood, comes and asks her to help him with infiltrating her former court, and it's very complicated. I don't know how to explain this without getting to all the world building, but she ends up agreeing to help him, and it's just super fun. I really love Surin, not as much as I love Jude, but she's so great. I really love her character development. I really enjoyed this book. I only gave it 4.5 stars just because, I don't know, it felt a little like there was just something missing for me. I'm not sure what it was. It was not full 5-star 5, and I really can't articulate why that's the case, because I did really enjoy so many aspects of it. I loved Surin. I liked Oak well enough. I'm hoping we'll get more development about him in the next book. And also there's no romance in this. Or I mean, there's hints of like a future romance. It's very much like the first book of The Folk of the Air in that way, but like even less tension. But it's so fun, and I really loved being back in this world, and it has all of the Holly Black energy you could possibly ask for. And yes, even though this isn't a full solid 5 stars like I thought it would be, it was still really amazing. Very good 4.5 star book, and yeah, I loved it. And then next up is Valiant Ladies, which is historical romance, and it's set in 17th century Peru. It basically follows Anna and Kiki. Kiki is like the daughter of the richest person in their city, and Anna is her friend who lives with them. It's basically these two have spent like the past several years sneaking out at night, being sort of avenging forces, like carrying out a sort of vigilante justice. And the two of them are best friends and also fully in love with each other. They know they can't really act on it because Kiki's entire future's planned out. It's, you know, all complicated. Basically, they start noticing this building pattern of this sort of conspiracy plot thing, and they're trying to investigate that. And that's basically the plot of the book. But it's just so fun. Like, I love these sword lesbians. They're so great. The romance is so great. I loved it. And I thought the mystery aspect was a little weaker. It's just, that part is somewhat predictable. You kind of know immediately who the evil people are and who the like good people are. And so that's kind of annoying. If that part of the plot had been a little stronger, this would have been an absolute 5-star read, because I absolutely adore the characters and it's just so fun. Because of the relative weakness of the plot, then I did have to knock it down a star, so it's a 4-star read. I would still definitely really recommend it. The predictability of the plot isn't book ending or anything. It's still really fun and a really enjoyable read, even though it's not that much of a mystery. It's still a really fun historical adventure plot thing, and I would still really recommend it. I don't usually enjoy historical fiction, but this, like, it didn't adhere that strongly to historical norms or anything, but it was set historically, and I don't usually love historical fiction settings, but I did really enjoy this and would definitely recommend it. And next up was Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey, which I read on Libby, and it was a solid, I gave it 4 stars, but on reflection it might be 3.5. I'm not sure. Actually, no, definitely it's 3.5. But it's basically it's a companion novel to It Happened One Summer, which I really enjoyed. And this is following the sister of the main character in It Happened One Summer, as well as the best friend in the love interest in It Happened One Summer. Our main characters are Hannah and Fox. And Hannah works in movies where she's assistant to the director, I think. But she wants to get into curating music, whatever that job is, for movies. And basically the movie they're currently shooting ends up, somewhat at her suggestion, relocating to shoot in the small town where It Happened One Summer was set. She ends up staying with Fox, who she's been friends with since the events of It Happened One Summer. But Fox is a kind of notorious womanizer, and everyone's warning him, like, stay away from Hannah, you're, like, not good enough for her, and blah, blah, blah. And so the plot is basically they're in this, like, forced proximity where they're in the same room, or where they stay in the same apartment, even though Fox is convinced that he's not good enough for Hannah and that he should stay away from her. The romance is cute, and it talks a lot about toxic masculinity and, like, expectations of men. I don't really know how to describe it, but it does have some interesting points that I wouldn't normally expect in romance books. I really enjoyed how a lot of the character development was focused on Fox rather than Hannah, where usually it's the female main character in these sorts of, like, very typical romance books that has to go through all the character growth and everything. But I enjoyed that it was centered on Fox. And it was a cute romance, and I did ship them, and I did enjoy it. It's just, it wasn't great. And I think it lacked a lot of the spark and interest of It Happened One Summer for me. I don't know. I just found It Happened One Summer to be much more compelling than this. So, yeah, I think I'm going to change my rating to 3.5 stars, because it definitely was not a 4-star book. It was a fun time, especially if you enjoyed It Happened One Summer and wanted to see what happened in these characters. But it wasn't great. Like, comparing this to Love Theoretically, there's absolutely no contest. Love Theoretically is better. That's what I have to say about Hook, Line, and Sinker. And then next up was The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, where, if you haven't heard of this book, then you clearly have not been on book social media in the past couple months, because it's been everywhere. So I read this on Kindle Unlimited. It's set in this vampire world, and our main character is a human who was adopted by the king of the vampires, and her name's Aurea. I don't really know. It's not important. But basically she enters this event called the Kajari, which is meant to honor the goddess of death / the moon / night. I'm not really sure. But basically she enters it, and it's basically if you win, then you're granted a boon by the goddess. And she's planning on using that to tie her life force to her adopted father as a way for them to kind of pull their power, and also a way for her to be safe in this vampire world where everyone wants to, drink her blood and kill her. The Kajari is basically this battle to the death where there's a series of trials and takes place over quite a few months, and each of the trials is meant to honor a different part of the death / moon goddess's myth. It's an interesting book. I don't really know how to describe this. It's basically just following this tournament thing, but there's also this romance going on between her and Ryan, I don't know. It's Raihn, which who knows how that's meant to be pronounced in a fantasy setting. For the middle trial, you're required to work you need to work in a team, so they have to team up partway through the trial. And yeah, it's basically her versus a bunch of vampires. It's just a ton of battle, and if it's your thing, then I think you'd really enjoy it. I give it 4 stars because it is a solid fantasy, and I really enjoyed Araya's character, and I'm interested in seeing where the story goes in the second book, which I am planning on reading sometime soon. It's just, it was lacking something for me. I think part of it's probably just I don't like vampires, so as the main characters in the story, I would prefer no vampires. And I also don't like this sort of like tournament to the death style competition as the center of a story. Like, I never liked the Hunger Games that much. But I don't know, I did enjoy the character development, and I did enjoy like the gradually unraveling world building and plot reveals as Araya kind of learns more about what's going on. And it's definitely really interesting, and I do think it's a very solid fantasy book. It just wasn't my personal favorite, but I can definitely see why a lot of people adore it. the hype wasn't fully there for me personally. Next up after that was Bellegarde by Jamie Lilac, which was an e-arc I received that came out on July 11th. And I have mixed feelings about this. It's technically a historical romance, but the historical part is basically not at all there. Like, it's set there for the purposes of there are balls, and other than that, everyone's completely acting like modern teenagers. And it's basically just, it's a retelling of She's All That, which I've never seen, but I know the basic plot of. There's this competition where there's this court ball held annually, and Parisian girls are nominated to become the Bellegarde something, I don't remember. But basically to be deemed the, like, prom queen equivalent. And it's basically, if you win that, then you become the most desired woman in France, and you become part of this very influential little society just made of people who have previously won this, like, title. Our main character is Evie, who is the daughter of a baker. Our main male character is Beau Bellegarde. He's part of a very influential family, except he is a bastard child who was born in an affair, but his mother died, so he was taken in by the father. And so he's an older brother who's, like, the legitimate heir. Basically, the brother bets his entire inheritance, where he's set to inherit most of the fortune. And he bets the entire inheritance that Beau cannot make Evie become prom queen equivalent, whatever the title was. And so Beau's trying to help her become more popular and such in order to do that, and she doesn't know that he's doing this because of a bet. And they're gradually growing closer over this and developing feelings for each other, blah, blah, blah. And it was really only okay. It wasn't great. It was definitely trying to channel some of the, like, Bridgerton historical romance books energy that has been very popular recently. It's just, it was not there. Like, I didn't care at all about the characters. I think the conflicts were resolved too easily. And I honestly just don't think that setting She's All That retelling in historical France and not changing things in order to adapt to the setting was a good choice. Like, it didn't make sense to me. I didn't enjoy it. It was kind of absurd. Like, there are some cases where these changes I'm perfectly fine with. Like, making historical settings more accepting of queer characters and interracial relationships and everything is, I think, a good change in these sorts of romances. But doing away with all the notions of propriety and stuff that would have accompanied these sorts of interactions at the time and all of that, I think, was a poor choice. It basically just ends up being people acting like they're completely in the 90s, just they happen to have ball gowns and stuff. I mean, it's okay if the source setting is your thing. Like, I gave it 3.5 stars. It wasn't horrible. And the romance was kind of cute. Yeah, I really don't know what was going on with this book. It was okay. That's about all I have to say. If you really like She's All That, or you really like this sort of historical romance, then you might really enjoy this. If not, I would probably skip it. And then next up is The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, which was a reread. As I said before, I'm slowly rereading the first 5 books of Throne of Glass in order to read the last 3 books of Throne of Glass. And I actually really enjoyed this book a lot more than I did the first time around, I think. I originally gave it 4 stars, now I'd probably give it closer to 4.5. But I'm still keeping it at 4 stars because might as well average the 2. But this is basically a set of novellas following our main character Selena in the events leading up to Throne of Glass. And you can either read this before starting the first book of Throne of Glass or after reading Heir of Fire. I've done after Heir of Fire both times I read the series just because that's what's recommended for, like, the romantic reading order as opposed to the chronological reading order, where most of the things that happen in this book don't show up again until Queen of Shadows. Reading it in this order kind of maximizes the emotional impact of everything. I just think Throne of Glass is a better introduction to the series than this is. I mean, I know a lot of people who enjoy reading this before Throne of Glass, and I can definitely see why that would be good, because it does give you more sympathy for Selena, and it gives her more humanity than she has at the beginning of Throne of Glass when she's just been through a very traumatic event. I mean, I can see the pros of both reading orders, but I prefer the romantic one. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed all the stories, which I wasn't expecting. I truly forgot how much I hate Arobin, who's the king of the assassins who takes Selena in and such. I truly forgot how despicable he is. I mean, I remember he was despicable, and I remembered the main bad thing he does. But there were so many small things where I was like, I forgot how horrible you are. But yes, this is a very good book. I don't understand how you could... I know there are people who have just skipped it and not read it while reading Throne of Glass. I don't understand how you could do that. I don't know, it's really good. It's really fun seeing as Selena explores a lot of places that aren't really touched on in the Throne of Glass main series, because she's had to travel to a bunch of different places. So it's fun seeing a more expanded world. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't have that much to say about it. Very good, very solid Sarah J. Maas book. And next up is Making Conversation by Christine Longford. I did a very detailed reading blog of this when I read it for my Reading the Highest and Lowest Rated Books on my Goodreads TBR video last week, or 2 weeks ago. This was the lowest rated book on my TBR according to Goodreads, and accordingly I gave it 2.5 stars. I found the reviews were accurate. I don't even really know how to explain this. Just go watch my reading vlog if you are interested. It's a time. It's just such a weird little book. I don't know. It's very strange. That's what I have to say. But after that, I read The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, separate from that challenge. We'll get back to the end of that challenge later. But this was one of my favorite books of the year so far. It was so fun. It's just this pirate adventure, and I just love all the characters. It's set around pirates and like the Indian Ocean, and it's so fun. It's just this really good historical fantasy mystery story. It's just absolutely the best time. I don't know if you can see all my tabs, but this was so fun, and I absolutely adored it. This is definitely in the running for the best book I've read so far this year, because it's so wonderful, and I had the absolute best time reading it, and I'm so excited for the rest of the series. It basically follows Amina al-Sirafi, who was a very famous pirate, but she went into retirement 10 years previously in order to raise her daughter, and she's basically pulled out of retirement by the mother of one of her former crew members, who hires her to track down the crew member's daughter, who she says has been kidnapped. And so it kind of has the like getting the gang back together energy, because she goes and tracks down all of her former crewmates, and it's so fun. It's so fun seeing them solve this mystery and deal with all this magic and stuff. They all simultaneously like kind of don't want to be there because they have lives now, but also they can't help but absolutely love the adventure and being back on the ocean and everything, and it's just so good. Like, I can't help but smile when I'm talking about this, because it was just amazing. If you love morally great characters, if you love just eclectic outcast crews, if you remotely like pirates, if you just want a really good adventure story, then this is absolutely for you. I can't recommend it enough. It's an extremely fun adventure, but it's also very much about motherhood and about faith and belief. It's just so fun, and it's so epic in scale, and it's just the best adventure story I could possibly ask for, but it also has depth. It's not just about like the adventure, but it's so good. So yeah, if you can't tell, I can't recommend this enough. 5 stars. I would give it 6 stars if I could. And yeah, read The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. You won't regret it. And then next up was a different pirate book, which was The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, which had been on my TBR for absolutely ages, because I was like, oh, queer girl pirates, what more could I want? The answer is a lot. I could want a lot more. This was just an extremely strange book. It's set in this world where one empire has kind of conquered most of the world, and pirates are kind of the only thing resisting it. I had numerous issues with this book. One is there was not enough world building. Like, the author definitely had a very clear image of how the world worked, but that was not conveyed to the readers. There were tons and tons of references to stuff where I was just like, I don't know what's happening, because they did not explain it enough. This follows our 2 main characters. One is Evelyn, who is a very highborn girl in the Empire. I don't remember the names of any countries in this, but she's very highborn, and her parents send her off on a ship to an arranged marriage with a husband who's in a very far-flung colony of the Empire. And meanwhile, Flora, our other main character, poses as Florian. So she's basically posing as a boy to work on this pirate ship. What we know from her POV, but what Evelyn does not know, is it's actually a slaver ship. So midway through the voyage, they capture all of the people who paid for passage, and they then take them to a country outside the empire to sell them as slaves. And it's just, I did not know about that going into this book. But I don't know how you can have this character who is so complicit in working on a slave ship and expect us to be sympathetic to them. Like, on the one hand, she had no choice when she originally started. Like, she first got on the ship when she was extremely little and she and her brother had no money, and they didn't really have another choice. But they have had a choice since then. This is not a case where slaving is a huge enterprise and it would be very hard to get a position where you're not working on a slaving ship. Like, it seems like this is one of the only ships that is doing this, and she could definitely leave and join another ship if she really wanted to, and it's just like, she's so complicit in this. And I don't know. I really liked Evelyn as a character. Flora I have more issues with, where she's definitely had a very traumatic past, but I had a lot of issues justifying her actions. This book is split up into a very strange 3 parts, so I can't really explain the second and third part without explaining the first part. But it just generally feels very disconnected. There's no world building, and it's just very confusing. If all you're looking for is queer girl pirate fantasy story, then I might give it a try. But if you're looking for anything more, I really wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I just really wish there had been more world building, but it's definitely a really interesting setup, and I could tell the author had these really, like, in-depth plans for how all this is working, and we just don't get any of that, which is really unfortunate because just this book had tons of potential, and I just feel like it was robbed a bit. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I was tempted to give it 3 stars. I mean, I did really like Evelyn as a character. I did like the fantasy elements of it, like the elements that were in here, where there were I liked the mermaid lore in it, and the role of the sea and everything, and the world building had so much promise. So basically it would be a 3-star book, but because it had so much potential and I can definitely see what the book could have been, then I'm giving it an extra 0.5 star. So 3.5 stars. This was definitely a disappointment because I was expecting to adore this book. But yeah, that's what I have to say about The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea. And then next up is a book that absolutely did not disappoint, which was the second half of my rating the highest and lowest rated books on my TBR according to Goodreads video, and that was The Winter of the Witch, which is the 3rd book in the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden, and it was amazing. I talked about this more in depth again in my vlog for this from 2 weeks ago, but all I have to say is this is an absolutely perfect fantasy trilogy. It's got such magic and wonder. I don't have anything bad to say about this trilogy. It's amazing. And I love seeing the growth of our main character, Vasya, from she's a very small child in the 1st book to being almost an adult in the 3rd. And it's just so beautiful and wonderful, and I can't recommend it enough. And if you want my thoughts more in depth, then again, go check out my previous video. I adore this series. It's just amazing. Read this series. It's good. And then next up was a really little book by one of my favorite authors, which is Poison for Breakfast by Lemony Snicket. Now, if you don't know, Lemony Snicket wrote A Series of Unfortunate Events, which was one of my favorite childhood series. I absolutely adore him. And this book's been on my TBR for a while, but I haven't really picked it up because, I don't know, I just didn't. But I was looking for audiobooks on Libby because I was looking for something to listen to while I was doing a puzzle. I saw the audiobook for this was narrated by Patrick Warburton, who plays Lemony Snicket in the Series of Unfortunate Events TV show on Netflix, which I absolutely adore. And so I was like, I have to listen to the audiobook. And it helped that it's only 3 hours long. It's simultaneously this like little book of philosophy, but it's also a mystery. And I don't really know how to explain it, but it's really fun. It's a really short read. Explanation if you aren't familiar. But Lemony Snicket is the pen name for Daniel Handler, who is the actual author of all of these. But it's basically, Lemony Snicket is his like in-universe pen name, where basically the idea is in a series of unfortunate events and all the wrong questions, and the idea is Lemony Snicket is recounting actual events that happened to him. Basically, in this book, Lemony Snicket receives this note under the door after he's eaten breakfast, and the note says, "There was poison in your breakfast." So he then sets out to investigate all of that, and along the way gets involved in a lot of contemplation, and that's where all the philosophy ideas come in. And it's just a really fun little book, and I really enjoyed it. It definitely has rereadability. Like, I definitely did not get everything I could have gotten out of this on the first read, so I'm definitely going to reread it at some point, but it's super fun. It's a super short read, no matter what format you read it in. And yeah, this was an easy 5 stars. I love Lemony Snicket. And then the last book, which I stayed up very late on the night of July 31st in order to finish it, which was The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. And this was not my first Brandon Sanderson book, where I did read The Rhythmatist back in middle school, but this is like my first actual Brandon Sanderson book, and it's my first Cosmere book. This is the first book in the first Mistborn trilogy, and it's basically set in this world where the Chosen One failed, and that's the conceit of the book. And it's set 1,000 years after that event happened, and it's basically following this heist to overthrow the Lord Ruler, who is the dictator / god of the world now. It's so fun. If you like Sticks of Crows, you'll like this. It's kind of got that gang of outcast criminals trying to do something bigger. And the world building is amazing. The magic system is so good, and it was just so good. Like, I understand all the hype around Brandon Sanderson, and now I just want to read all his books because this was so good. I finished it, and all I could think about was this book because it was so good. And the conclusion, it was just absolutely perfect fantasy book. I don't know, if you like heist stories, you'll love it, but really, if you just love any fantasy stories, you'll love this book. It's so good. And yeah, I really can't wait to read the rest of this trilogy and read the rest of the Cosmere. This and Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, I don't have enough stars for how many stars I want to give them. So yeah, those were the 15 books I read in July. Overall, it was a really good reading month. There were a couple of flops, but other than that, absolutely amazing books. I definitely had a very sporadic reading month where I'll put the chart up here, but you'll see there's some where I read upwards of 400 words and other days where I read like 50 words maybe, or 0 words. There are a lot of days where I read 0 words. So that was not great. You know, it ended up working out because I did read a lot of books, but I would have liked to have a more balanced reading month. I had planned to fix that this upcoming month by doing a reading 200 pages a day for a week challenge, but that's kind of ended up falling through because as of when I'm filming this, which is August 6th, I'm having a lot of turmoil with my housing for this upcoming school year and such, and I just don't have time to do it. Like, I'm just trying to figure out what my life is going to be like this upcoming year. I don't have time to be reading 200 pages a day. Because of that, I'm having to do some re-planning of my content for the next couple of weeks, just because I don't really know what I'm doing. Because of this chaos, then I don't currently have the ability to do the things that I was planning on doing, which were 2 challenges, so I'm probably gonna have to find something else to do it. I might end up doing a sort of like summer reset reading vlog thing, but we'll end up seeing where that goes. And yeah, that's about all I have for today, but thank you so much for sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed it, and yeah, I will see you later.